Testing. All good?
Leave that out the way. Well, good evening, everybody. We may well have some people who still run a few minutes late to join us, but I believe we should press on anyway with those that are with us already. So good evening, and thank you for taking the time this evening to join us and contribute to our first ever community budget consultation process for the 23-24 budget. Before we continue, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this great land on which we meet and on which our region is formed, and acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge my council colleagues, the Deputy Mayor Jeff McConnell, councillors Marshall Chalk, Duncan McGuinness, Michael Enright, Virginia West, and the newest member of our team, Amanda Hay, and also some partners who have joined them this evening to see if we stay on script with the same as we were the other night. This evening is a first in many ways, and we're still got our trainer wheels on as we're working through this process. But I will up front thank the council team, in particular the council executive team, the CEO David Keenan just to my right here, and the rest of his team, who will, some of whom will be playing an active part in this evening's presentation. So this is the first time we've gone out to the community to seek your feedback on our financial planning for the coming year. And tonight's session is the second of three to be held across the region, and the third will be tomorrow evening on Tamborine Mountain. So as a group of councillors, we're pleased to present the draft budget for your consideration. It reflects Council's determination to continue to build a strong future for the Scenic Rim and provide best value to ratepayers through the responsible allocation of what are always limited financial resources. This draft budget has been framed in the context of fiscal responsibility based on robust planning and analysis to ensure sustainability, a strategic approach to service delivery to meet community needs and expectations, and of course, above all, good governance. It's been framed in the context of increasing cost pressures, reflecting the current economic climate as well as ongoing recovery from the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and a series of extreme weather events which have affected our region. As well as the draft budget itself, this consultation includes our capital works program and our schedule of fees. Members of our executive team, who I've already referenced, will be able to discuss those various aspects with you, and will be providing a presentation around some of those items. As a council, we are committed to minimising the financial burden on ratepayers, and we've continued to focus on cost recovery and setting fees and charges this year. We understand the cost of living pressures facing members of our community and have aimed to keep our revenue needs to a minimum. However, balancing the aspirations of the community captured in the shared vision of the Scenic Rim Community Plan 2011 to 2026 against the pressures of maintaining public assets and protecting our future financial sustainability are all key factors in determining our budget settings. The draft 2023-2024 budget is aligned with the draft operational plan, which is underpinned by the corporate plan Scenic Rim 2026 and the broader Scenic Rim Community Plan 2011 to 2026. During consultation in developing our community plan, one of the key priorities identified by residents was the efficient and equitable delivery of affordable services that provide best value for money. That guiding principle has underpinned the development of this budget. As well as tonight's session, we will be holding the final event of this series tomorrow night, as I've already alluded to. That'll be at Tamborine Mountain State School. Of course, following tonight, you can continue to contribute to the community consultation through the Let's Talk Scenic Rim online platform, which will be accepting feedback on this project until the Wednesday the 3rd of May. Once all feedback has been considered, the final 2023-2024 annual budget will be prepared and then tabled for adoption at a special meeting of Council scheduled for Wednesday 14th of June. Council values all feedback and is committed to continuing to work with the community to deliver a sustainable future for our region. I thank you for your time in attending tonight's session, and I'm sure also I can thank you in anticipation of your constructive feedback that will help to achieve our shared goal of shaping a successful future for our spectacular Scenic Rim. Thank you. I'd now like to hand you over to our CEO to continue the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm not going to talk for a very long period at all. I'd like to welcome the 4 General Managers here: General Manager of Sustainability, General Manager of Assets and Sustainability, General Manager of People and Strategy, and the General Manager of Customer and Regional Prosperity. What's been presented to the community is a balanced budget. This is part of a process where the community becomes more aware of the financial capacity and limitations of this organisation. There are competing cost pressures out there at this point in time. I know you've all heard about the cost of living. That same cost of living gets passed on to a local government authority. So our energy bills, for example, have gone up by $100,000 per annum, and we need to find how we can actually cover those going through. Can I ask you to please ask as many questions as you like after the presentation from Oliver and Chris? Please consider, if you want to make a more detailed submission, that you can put that in. And please also consider that if you wish to, you can speak to Council about your submission as well. So this is part of consultation process around the budget. This is very similar to what happens in Victoria and very similar to what happens in New South Wales, but we will be one of the few councils doing this in Queensland at this point in time. So I'm going to ask Oliver to come forward and start the presentation.
Thank you, David. Those who don't know me, my name is Oliver Pring, and as the CEO has indicated, I'm the General Manager of Council Sustainability. What we're presenting tonight is the draft position of the 23-24 budget, and again recognise the fellow colleagues here who've all contributed immensely to preparing tonight's position for consultation. Likewise, I'm not going to go through too much. I'm really just going to provide a very quick synopsis of the budget documentation, which is available on Council's Let's Talk Scenic Rim platform, and it's also available on the website. And there's also there may be a number of printed documents available at the back if you do require one. But I'll really go through it in quick fashion, and really want to maximise the opportunity for the participants, you guys out there tonight, to submit any feedback, any queries that may be of the document. So without further ado, I guess I'll go on and say, Council sets about and develops the annual budget because it's responsible for providing a wide range of services, facilities and assets to the Scenic Room community. These services and facilities include, but are not limited to, roads, bridges, waste management, parks and recreation, libraries, community centres and even disaster management. Additionally, it's the budget that provides an opportunity for the Council to communicate its priorities and plans to the community. And part of that communication is the purpose of tonight, is to seek feedback and input from residents and stakeholders. And this really helps to ensure that Council spending aligns with the needs and expectations of the community. You'll find in the budget documentation that Council adopts not only the current year budget, but also the 3 years, but also out to a 10-year forecast. And this allows to ensure that Council is aware of all these implications and is aware of all our obligations that we need to forecast and take into account, so that the elected members are able to make an informed decision, not just for this current term of Council, but for the future generations, as well as out to the 10 years. If I go into the right one, so I guess the key points is the 23-24 budget, the headline budget, as what we call it, is looking at about 110 million budget. That includes operating and capital, less depreciation and finance costs. So when councils go out there and say that they're adopting a budget, that's effectively what they refer to as a headline budget. So for 23-24 at this current stage, it's 110.819 million. The documentation provides some splits in terms of where that's aligned to. This page here basically references the percentage of how Council is intending to fund that expenditure. You can see on the graph there, the lion's share of the funding relates to the rates and utility charges, and we also get a share of grant subsidies contributions of 6%. This includes the financial assistance grants that we receive, share of profits from our associate, which is our urban utilities, our interest in there, along with fees and charges and interest of any investment that we have with financial institutions. Just interestingly, one of the points I will touch on is back to the rates, is how we determine the calculating the general rates. It's important to determine the total value of the properties within the region, and this is usually done by obtaining the land valuations from the Queensland Government's Valuer General. Once we are aware of all the value of the total properties is known, Council can then determine the rate in the dollar to apply to the properties and categories. The rate in the dollar is calculated by dividing the total amount of rates revenue the Council needs to raise by the total value of all properties in the Council's jurisdiction. It's important to note that the land valuation is just one of the factors that's used to calculate the property rates. Other factors include the property's use, location, size. From recent revaluations, they've certainly been in the media recently. We've seen the recent valuations undertaken in October, November last year, 2022, that the total valuation of the 18,493 properties within the region, they've increased from a valuation of around 6.48 billion to 8.33 billion, or around 28.69% increase across the board. With that in mind, it's important that we quash the misconception that the rates will go up exponentially. We have seen some property valuations in the region go up as much as 90%. Now, your general rates won't necessarily go up that amount. As mentioned before, Council, in providing the wide range of services, facilities and assets, determine the level of rates through utilising property valuations. And we have to take into account, as the CEO pointed out before, inflation, rising costs of materials, fuels, insurance, etc., to calculate the level of funding required accordingly. In simple terms, I do a simple rationale that if the council required $1 million in budget to fund all those services and assets, and the property valuations were also at $1 million, the rate in a dollar would be $1. So that would fund $1 million to fund the council budget. If in the revaluation those valuations, property valuations doubled to $2 million, then council would adjust the rate in a dollar to 50 cents to raise the same amount of dollars it would require to fund the budget. So yeah, in that effect, the rate in a dollar would be 50 cents as opposed to $1. So you'd still get the same end result at the end of the day. Before going on to the document, I just want to sort of stress out that council, the other aspect is the high level of regulations and scrutiny that council has to abide by. And that starts with the Department of State Development, Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning, along with the Queensland Treasury Corporation. They keep a close eye on council's budgets and actual performance to ensure that prudent decisions are being catered and covered for. I might just quickly go through some of the documentation, which again is readily available. So some key aspects here, it sort of splits out some of the key aspects or operations of council that we're required to fund. This is certainly one of the key aspects of the documentations. It provides for 3 positions. The budget currently, the way it currently stands, it's not the final. As it currently stands, to provide council a balanced budget. The modelling has indicated that we require around a 7.9% rate increase across the whole board. That's not individual rates, but in total general rates and the community infrastructure charge. The 2 positions either side of that is council could consider a 6.9% rate increase, but that would result in a deficit budget and a budget that's not compliant with statutory and legislative requirements. And council could consider an 8.9% increase, which meets legislative and statutory requirements. It provides a surplus budget, but also increases council's cash holdings. But what we've landed on at this current point in time in providing to the elected members is a position of around 7.9% to consider. This is a really good graph, and certainly Chris will go more about around the asset management and other obligations, but for every $100 in general rates that's currently being paid, this is a quick synopsis of where those $100 are being catered to or provided to. I'm not going to go through them, but it's in the budget documentation. And other than that, the long-term financial forecasts that I spoke about briefly are also contained in the budget documentation at the end of the form. That about wraps my presentation, and I'll certainly be here to field any further queries.
How much is the operational?
Oh, sorry, that's what I missed out. So based on this position of 7.9%, we've indicated that's a balanced budget. That's actually providing, if you go into our statutory financial documents, you can see that in that shaded column in the grey, that's actually providing an operating surplus of $33,000, which is basically a zero or a balanced budget. I'll hand over to Chris Gray now to provide some aspects around the capital delivery and asset management.
Good evening to you all. I'm here to present about the capital budget, but I'll just only highlight certain aspects of the budget. But before I do, I'd like to certainly spend a little bit of time talking about our assets themselves. At the moment, our current book value or written book value of our replacement of our council assets sits at approximately $1.1 billion. We actually have 4 asset management plans that cover off the majority of these assets, and these asset management plans actually provide a high level direction with regard to the level of investment and need for each of the asset class that they cover. On saying that, this year will be somewhat of a consolidation year, or the proposed draft budget will be a consolidation year. because we've got a continued fairly major program with our disaster recovery and arrangements. We currently have an approximate reconstruction value of about $50 million, which is a result of the previous years' work, a couple of years of disasters or declared events. It's highly likely the value of that work will end up being in excess of $60 million. You won't actually find that written in the draft budget. It will occur as part of the carryover into next year. While I mention that, I should also acknowledge the Queensland and Australian Government who fund the majority of these restoration works. The Queensland Government 25% and the Australian Government approximately 75% after Council does its initial investment. What you will see in the budget is actually $2 million in minor works, including betterment within the draft budget. This enables Council to have the opportunity to not only build or replace the asset as it was, but also to build back better, and also to allow for a small investment when the state and federal government actually also agree that we need to build back better in certain locations. We also have a reseal program, which is slightly less than what we normally have to take into account the fact that we are doing some work within the betterment, the reconstruction sphere. That program is at $3.6 million, with about 40% of it being spent within the central region of the Scenic Rim. Also want to highlight that we do have continued upgrade of Kerry Road within the program, with 2 sections identified with an approximate value of $1.5 million to undertake that work. Also have allocation of reconstruction of a section of Verdale Scrub Road with an approximate value of $4.8 million. We also have a level of investment within our community facilities and council provided facilities. Some of the highlights, which also are contained in part of this year's budget, but will flow into next year, is an allowance to improve sporting facilities with a focus on lighting, which at this point in time we've put in an application for supplementary support to hopefully be successful in lighting Selwyn Park in an improved manner. We have a number of other investments across this facility's asset class to ensure an appropriate service level is met and maintained. It's also worth noting that Council has undertaken a review of its community facilities, and this review will inform us how best to invest in these facilities into the future. We'll also mention Vibrant Active Towns and Villages program. Council has recently decided to continue to fund the further stages of the Beaudesert Town Centre redevelopment, which will continue into next year. I will add that Council has a long-term commitment to also undertaking reviews of some of our villages, as well as the next stage of the Vibrant Active Towns and Villages program, with Canungra being a town that, if the budget is approved in its current format, has a funding allocation for that process to start. We also understand the need to actually invest in our infrastructure to best serve our community as a growing community, with some emphasis on also understanding that the appropriate levels of investment to ensure that we provide the appropriate services to further development, in particular industrial land, so that we actually have jobs to back up the growth that we actually have within the region. With that, now Oliver's disappeared, I will hand back to Oliver to take on some questions.
Thanks, Chris. As you would appreciate, that's a very, very brief synopsis of the current budget. But as it stands, the documentation is available through the Let's Talk Scenic Rim platform, and the purpose of these consultations is to obviously open it up to the floor to receive any feedback, queries, so that we can either take them on those or we provide shed some answers onto some of those queries. So we do have a couple of roving mics around, so if we start the questions going now, and we'll direct those to the appropriate officer that is required to be able to. One over here, thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone, for the presentation. I'd like to congratulate you on the discipline of sticking to the flow down from the community plan and the emphasis on the sustainability. One of the things in budgeting I've found over the years is the need to spend what you've got wisely, and I just wonder whether you're still continuing with zero-based budgeting.
We do. That's one of the key components of the budget pack that's been introduced in the last few years, is that historically in the past, officers were just given the previous year's sort of worksheets and then indexed up as a starting point, but no, everything starts off at zero, and they have to justify the level of expenditure around all aspects. And part of that, our progression towards that is certainly on the asset management aspects, further highlighting the need to have a heavy focus on asset management to incorporate that level of thinking in the budget. And then most certainly one of the other projects that we're working on through Caroline is through the development of our service catalogue, which will really take a lot of that emphasis around the levels of service and how much it costs to provide those services to the community. So it's the service of level, not the dollars that are being focused on. Thank you.
Thank you for the effort you put into doing this. What I'd like to, I just want to sort of go back on these rates. I'm paying rates on about $12.5 million of rural land here in the Shire. In past years, we all have to battle on to keep things on an even keel. Your increase has always been more than the inflation rate. Well in front of me. Inflation rate, probably if I did one of our commercial buildings in Brisbane, it was about 8%. I was only allowed 4%. This is a business away from here. So why is it that council couldn't keep in the previous years, council couldn't keep what they wanted in line with the inflation rate? So why should I trust council now? Let me put it a better way. What could have you cut back to make it easier on the ratepayers and reduce the 7.9% you need? What could you cut back? And the second thing is, in relation to the total income that you got from rates last year, how much has it gone up this year? Is it just going to be the 7.9%?
There's multiple aspects to that, so I'll answer them in a separate fashion.
Do this one first, because I'll understand you better that way.
Yeah.
Is the intake of rates under a 7.9% increase, is it 7.9% more than last year, the actual rates?
That's what's intended, yes. To provide the balanced budget, we've anticipated that
No, the question's not that at all. The question is, there was a certain amount, whatever the rate you got in last year that you had to spend, is this under a 7.9% increase next year? Is that increase only 7.9%? Or is it more?
It's 7.9% from the current budget, 22-23, yes.
There's no more, okay.
Yeah, so basically when we go, we start up the zero-based budgeting worksheets to provide the same level of service to maintain the number of assets that we have. We've indicated that all our revenue streams...
No, look, no need to go through that. I understand that. I'm not fighting you over that or complaining. I'm not complaining about that. I'm just simply wanting to know if it was 7.9% more than last year on that.
In terms of total net rate, general rates and community infrastructure charge, yes, that's what's currently proposed as a position to fund the 23-24 is a 7.9%.
Thanks.
But that's with all the 19,000 rateable properties assessments. So not each of them is going to get exactly 7.9. So there's going to be some fluctuations in between. But yeah, you've got nearly 20,000 individual rate assessments to consider. But we'll touch on one of the other aspects that you raised in terms of inflation. I guess inflation is just one of the factors that we have to take into account. As you've rightly indicated, inflation currently sits at about 7.8% at the moment. However, we rely on a figure that's provided by the Queensland Local Government Association called the Council Cost Index. So it takes on a number of aspects that we've got to take into account. So at the moment, that's still being prepared by the LJQ, but generally that's a bit higher than what the inflation is because it takes into account various other factors. The CEO indicated that the electricity charge might be 100,000. I think it's a little bit more, but we've been told it's about 30 to 40% increase. So you take that into account and you take everything else.
We all have to take that in our business, yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening, everyone. I'll get that one sorted. So Kieran Walsh, just from the Beaudesert Soccer Club. One of the things in the aspects, and I thank Council to be looking at the Selwyn Park facility. Not everybody knows is that the Selwyn Park facility for the last 30 years is being underneath a lease of a sporting management committee that overlooks that. And as far as capital dollars and capital investment in that facility I've been involved in the club for 15 years. It's been through those mums and dads that operate the club to go get grants. So the actual toilet and amenity facilities has been upgraded through mums and dads applications. The canteens, been upgraded through mums and dads applications. We've had upgrades in the buildings, the tractors, everything that we need to operate and maintain, and that facility both has Beaudesert Cricket Association and has also Beaudesert Soccer Club out of that facility. So I welcome Council putting forward to put a grant submission into the Sporting and Infrastructure Queensland Government grants. It's the first time that we were being engaged through a process to get sporting grants for sporting facilities in Scenic Rim. And I say that being the first time because it was the first time I'd been actually asked to submit a letter of support for a grant submission. So that was the basis of that. Look, sporting facilities and sporting as a whole, and I can just talk on behalf of soccer, is that it's the World Cup for the women's game in Australia and New Zealand this year. It's going to be a fantastic tournament, and a lot of people from Scenic Rim will go along and enjoy watching the games and watching all of them online. But when it comes to the sporting facilities within the region, and specifically at Selwyn Park there, it's a shame that we can't actually go actively and go pursue more females in sport because the facilities just aren't there. We're not able to support, the necessary segregation that we need to have to maintain the amenity for all people coming along. We currently have male and female toilets, and that's not contemporary in our climate. We need some all abilities facilities in and around our sporting infrastructure. But it's so we've got some opportunities. We've got some missed opportunities. Not many people would know, but Beaudesert Soccer Club cannot play a game after 3 p.m. Haven't done last year in 2021, and not able to do that. In 2021 it commenced, 2022 the whole season they couldn't, and in 2023 we still maintain that we can't play a game after 3 p.m. And that's because there's no lighting facilities actually at that amenity. So why is lighting and why is community facilities? And there's some people here that may not be involved in sporting. Sporting ends up being not just the players, not just the kids that come along. It's actually a sense of community. It's that that engagement that the mums and dads and parents have, and having the enjoyment of watching kids, but also socially interacting with others. We have a high prevalence of children that come with special needs. Sporting facilities needs to match those, and we need to be looking to the future. I see in the budget here specifically that we've got only $107,000 put towards operating expenses for sporting facilities. I also make note in regards to there that out of a total capital program, there's $9.7 million going towards grants. I'm wondering if that's grants coming to us, or is that us seeking grants? And that's probably my challenge, is to saying what can we do to generate? Because I've probably got a list that's 40, 50 line long, for those facilities, and we need some support. Mums and dads are there to help, but we need support from council to continue to have a strategic plan. And last year, the sporting facilities strategic plan was brought forward. It's never been published. It's been spoken about. I think it's a missed opportunity. With more openness and transparency, I'd like for us to seek that, corporate support in regards to what we do. And that's the missed opportunity. When you don't have those strategic documents that you can take forward and represent, we're missing out on we can get the tens of thousands of dollar grants as mum and dads, but what we need to maintain facilities is hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants. So, thank you.
So I'll make a couple of comments on what you've said there. Yes, we certainly have undertaken a review of the sporting infrastructure and other community infrastructure, as well as camping facilities. We are in the process of putting that through as officers to council to consider. The other aspect to that is with regard to, I did mention we have put in for a grant or assistance for lighting at not only Selwyn Park but also Coronation Park at Boona. So that and you did also talk about the $9 million in grants. Well, a lot of that is specific to specific outcomes. So portions of that is grant opportunities for bridges, for roads, and other infrastructure like that. So we have to certainly have plans in place to attach them to the right grants as they come along. So and certainly we're in a similar position from the council point of view of having facilities that may not meet current standards or at the time don't meet current obligations to properly serve the community. So certainly acknowledge that from a sporting point of view, but also more generally with some of our, even our public conveniences. And we also plan to undertake a more general sport review and have an actual sport and rec plan in place. We're currently out to market to undertake or get an appropriately qualified consultant to come in and support us through that process. Won't have that finalised for this budget round, but we will certainly have that finalised for next year's budget round as well.
Thank you for the question. Just a couple of other quick bits that go in there. The document you asked about that hasn't been presented to council is due to go up to council on about May the 10th. So that one will go up, and then there'll be feedback or the final document through there as well. In Deborah's area, there will be, if the budget gets through in the current format as a draft, there'll be a position there to assist all sporting groups with getting funding, and also trying to make sure that any grants that are there for individual clubs can be followed up, etc. from there. The other important bit that Chris was referring to is having that overarching document that sets up the funding framework. So the Ross planning one will look at the existing infrastructure, we'll look at some participation rates, but the real participation rates will come through in this other document, which will also set out some basic ideas about where training might occur in 2032 as well. But it's part of trying to line up the levels of infrastructure that are required for some of the sporting areas and trying to make sure that we've got them ready to go when that funding comes out. I should make the point, we're in a bit of a funding hiatus at the moment. The state government is not giving out large amounts of funding, and they probably won't, given they've got elections up there in October of next year. We're also in a position where the federal government has not clarified its schemes or funding streams at this point in time as well. So I imagine they're going to hold off on them for a period of time, and we won't be able to put in any funding applications for probably about 6 months once they've worked out their criteria. So the councillors have certainly made it, well, Mayor and councillors have made it very clear that there's to be a bit of a focus on recreational infrastructure and community infrastructure at the same time. And if I remember quickly, there are works going on at Selwyn at the moment with the car park, etc. There's some other lights being put in there or upgraded at the moment. So we're trying to keep that moving along as well. But really good question.
Is that to come up? If I could just add also that Council in this draft budget has maintained the additional community grants program that they added in this current financial year, which was an additional $105,000 to the community development grants. So that is a significant amount of money that's sitting there. We run 2 rounds, and I think you've applied in the past, and we do a minor majors, and that additional grant funding has enabled us to fund most community groups to the full value of their project, whereas in the past we've had to fund part thereof. So should this budget go up again and be approved this year, it has that additional grant money in there as well, and a lot of community and sporting groups use that money to match to apply to other state government grant programs that come out.
Good evening, thanks for this opportunity. My name's Annette and I'm from Corralbin, I'm a resident there. Selwyn Park, you're lucky to have Selwyn Park to play sport on, because we have nothing, zilch. I don't know when we're going to be able to do anything or how, but there's just nothing. We're just hog-tied by probably everyone knows who. So do the council foresee a future for Corralbin ever having an oval?
Thanks very much. Good question, thank you very much. Councillor Enright took me out there just after I started. There are some opportunities out there that can be looked at. One of the things we're doing some primary draft stuff around is a park run out there to see if there's enough, and the people at the Men's Shed and Community Garden said that's something they'd like to look at in the future. It's going to take some time. The second plan I referred to that's been developed for the sports will pick up aspects coming out. So that one will provide some leverage by which hopefully we can get some funding, keeping in mind what I referred to, that we are in that hiatus at the moment.
Yeah,
but the commitment is certainly there from the councillors and the mayor to sort of go down and try and find and install some infrastructure in that area without a doubt.
There's also a polo field there that's sitting there redundant, a really good space. I also want to know, is the Hinchcliffe Bridge going ahead 23, 24, or will that money disappear?
Certainly, and yes, it is planned. We've certainly put the allocation portion that would be council's funding for that project to go ahead. As you would be aware, we council decided to hand back the application that they had due to the increased costs and the fact that, and I'll explain it this way, that the previous round had a cap of $2 million contributed by the Australian government, and to a maximum, 50-50 funding to a maximum of $2 million. The new round is at 80-20 funding, 80% by the Australian government to a maximum of $5 million. So it was around understanding and leveraging as much as we could from the Australian government with regard to that project. But certainly it is, I'm happy to, unfortunately, it is our number one priority to get that bridge upgraded, because it is still one of our more used timber bridges, and it doesn't provide what would be considered appropriate level of service, especially during flood times.
Thank you. Next question. Do council overall, do they believe that you should spend money to make money?
Oh, I can certainly invite the Mayor to talk about it. He certainly provides to us that we do have a lazy balance sheet, which means that there's potential in there. And obviously you're aware of the exercise Council undertook last year where we refinanced some historic loans at really high interest rates, and they were refinanced to historically low interest rates. Now, the department didn't allow us just to bank and capitalise on those savings. They made us, they said to council, if you were going to go down that line, you would have to take out some additional loans at what you would have saved those dollars. So there is capacity within some of the funds within council, and that's part of some capital included in there. So, however, you know, some examples of where we are spending money to make money is the Beaudesert Enterprise Precinct. So council is having to invest some dollars in there to hopefully, not only from the land sales, but to attract businesses to come to the region, and certainly look at some of the rates-based growing. Additionally, the advocating for Bromelton, although that comes with some challenges, but where council can advocate for that to attract some big players into town is also a key aspect of where we are with those things. So,
if I may, the other options there, obviously the beautification of Beaudesert, that project there is to spend money to attract businesses, attract people, get them to, I think your quote is linger longer within the town centres. So doing that is the other way. The other one we're looking at the moment is trying to expand the industrial park or land base within Boona as well. There is some need coming through there as well. So there is some need to spend money, but we do, wherever possible, get in grants from other levels of government, then help with the further development of bigger projects, and that's spending more money again.
Thank you. That's all I have to ask.
Thanks for taking it. I'm David Brennan. I'm just a farmer. But I'm just looking at these figures here. I think you're spending, I think I've got there 42%. I think you're spending nearly as much or half as much on parks and that as you are on the roads. Now, we know you had a battle with roads. I'm well aware of the trouble you have. But to me, do you need, number one, you need the roads to get people to the parks. And I know the hell of a battle you got all over the show off the roads. I'm well aware of that. Couldn't some of that money less money be put into those parks? I know the cemetery's in it. I think you've got an imbalance there. I think you could be pinching a bit of money there and putting to the roads. Because I am aware over a lifetime of that. You do have trouble with the roads. I'm well aware of that. Then you got, just have a look at that if you would, please. Thank you.
yeah, that's a good question, and I'll certainly start and hand the conversation over. But one of the points I raised before is, if council didn't focus on, traditionally councils have been about roads, rates, and rubbish. You don't focus on these things, and you neglect the needs of the community. A lot of people say we don't need libraries. We don't, they don't go in libraries. They don't go to swimming pools. They don't use the parks. However, there are a lot of other people that do use them, and I think, whilst that graph does show that for every dollar, 50 cents is going to the roads infrastructure, a lot more could be spent in there. But we're budgeting within our means in terms of allocating some of those expenditures in there. But certainly take your point around those, and that's not an uncommon sort of observation around this. And Chris?
Yes, certainly. Look, and what's rolled up in there is also our cemetery operations as well. So, and we do have quite a large park, what did you say, asset base. and it certainly takes a certain amount to not only manage the grass, but also manage other aspects of that open space, which is the control of weeds, and also managing any fire hazard that may be present as well. So yeah, there's a balance with all of that.
No, thanks, Chris. Now, I'm well aware that outside it's easy looking in. Thank you.
It certainly started the journey that we're talking about, service levels. You know, in comparison, I think we manage 6 pools in the Scenic Room for a population of around 44,000. I believe, you know, neighbouring councils like the Gold Coast, they don't have a pool. They only have 1 pool for every 60,000 people. Now, in maintaining those levels of service, you know, that comes at a cost. So it's certainly some of those things that you know, part of the conversation we're having in the community is understanding of the service that we provide and the costs that they come at. So. It's for the broadcast. Sorry, those that didn't know, tonight's session has also been broadcast, so that those that weren't able to attend will able to be dial in digitally. So,
thank you, Tom Sharp. Just a couple of quick questions, if I may. Firstly, on your resales and of $3.6 million, if you could just tell us how many kilometres that covers, and on your design roads for $1 million, is that for the $6 million you're spending on Kerry and Verdale? And a couple quick questions really relating to what David was trying to ask earlier, and I'm trying to understand this budget and council's decision-making processes going forward, and I can only reflect on some of the things you've done in the past. Fast Fern Guardian recently reported that council's under review of going through a financial downgrade by the Queensland Government in relation to your purchase of Gallery Walk, or land at Gallery Walk. Now, that was $6 million purchased of property at the height of the market. I believe that property is not all wanted by council. So I'm trying to understand council's priorities and how this works and why that was so important to spend that money, given the times that we're in. And also, it was very easily foreseeable at the point of time of that purchase that took place what was on the horizon. Enterprise, also, if you could talk to us, and again, I don't quite understand, that... Certainly.
Chris, I might just start with that Fassifern one.
Yeah,
I will correct some of the... Oh, okay, we'll do the first one. $3.6 million in resales.
Yes, so what length of kilometres that will do? I don't have the exact figure. What's included in the resale program is also restoration of the table drains, shoulder work, as well as minor pavement repairs. So that can vary depending on what roads are actually, or what sections of road are actually identified for or needing a reseal. Look, I'm trying to think back to what we actually covered off this year. Look, off the top of my head, I think it's around the 25 odd 30 Ks. The level of investment that's actually included works out to be approximately 12 to 14 years return interval on a sealed road, and about 20 to 25 years on a road that's asphalt. So when you look at about 900 odd Ks of, or closer to 970 odd Ks of sealed road, and mixture of asphalt and seal, I work on those numbers on an average over a 10 to 12 year period. So a lot of factors impact what it's actually cost for each section of road. So look, I can certainly get back to you on exactly how many kilometres, within approximately a couple of Ks of what we anticipate the $3.6 million will get us next year. And also, the other one was design. What we've found more recently, and probably more readily in the last 12 to 18 months, is the fact to need actually designs on the shelf so we can actually get our pre-construction activities undertaken. The big part is actually getting ordered pipes. If you'd have told me 3 or 4 years ago that you had to wait nearly 18 months for certain pipe sizes, I said, you're kidding me. Whereas now, that's the reality we live in. So to actually have designs in advance, orders in advance, allows us not only to be ready to construct when we can, but also at the same time potentially get reduced rates because we're not actually paying for a special run to get certain size pipes. As an example, other examples are we can do the other pre-construction activities like service relocations, which can take some time and can, if you need to accelerate or get them done, or get them carried out of sequence, you can actually pay top dollar for getting that done as well. The gallery walk purchase, that was a strategic land purchase to address a long-term issue with regard to parking issues in the gallery walk precinct. It was one of the options put forward by council officers. There's quite a substantial parcel of land associated with that site, of which only a portion of it is required for enhanced parking. We own a small block of land next to that houses all the current public convenience, which also will allow us to improve the operational costs of that facility by having an enlarged disposal area for that site as well. So there are a couple of advantages there. I'll let Ollie add anything extra, if he may, to that question.
Oh, I was just going to add the reference to, I guess, the Fast Phone Guards article recently, but council tabled a report where we had the results of a financial credit review undertaken on council. I guess the outcome of that was council was rated as having a sound, which it might sound mediocre, but that's actually a good rating that we're able to meet our obligations in the short to long term. There was the reference was around the outlook. We were rated as developing, which I guess if you look at it from the previous credit review undertaken in 2020 was actually an improvement. In 2020 we were rated as a negative outlook. So the report indicated that council would be downgraded to a negative if certain factors didn't align. There was no reference to the purchase of the property. The purchase of property was undertaken based on the relevant due diligence that was required to be undertaken. They didn't indicate that that the portion of land that council didn't require, if that wasn't sold, that could impact the outlook in those next couple of years. It wasn't around the purchase, it was around the offloading of that land. And for all intents and purposes, council is still intending to cut that portion of land that's not required for the gallery walk car park area and then sell that to the open market. And you know, council's borrowed dollars to fund that purchase on a 2-year basis with the intent that the sale of land would be effected within that same 2 years. So just sort of just correct that aspect that was reported in there previously.
So what is the surplus amount as a quantum? And my understanding, it was recommended at the time that it would have been far better to do a land reclamation only for the portion that you actually required.
I mean, I'll start by answering, I guess, as Chris outlined, this process has been on the, isn't new. It's been around for 30, 40 years, I believe. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. I think looking at some historic journals of council, if council purchased that block of land 30 years ago, it was only about $300,000 or $400,000. You know, if council was to sit on their hands again and not purchase that land, we could be looking at a figure much higher. So I'm not a real estate agent, but
it's probably not our role to comment on the value of properties
I
because
didn't say value. The portion of land, as in size.
It's probably not our role to comment on that. This is something that will be prepared to go to the marketplace. So the most we don't provide comment on certain aspects of it.
You're talking about the size of the actual land, yeah.
The size of the block. I think it's already
it's already
been printed in the paper. And
yeah,
it's
I think
also
so.
recorded in meetings.
So the portion of land that council's interested in designing that, so some of those preliminary designs have been done up, and they're obviously, they have got to go through council for final adoption, and that will then include the necessary part that will be sectioned off, and then sold off. Chris might be able to.
And sorry, just to follow up from your point, no, I wasn't saying that you shouldn't have gone ahead and done it. The strategy that was proposed, which is if you speak to people on the streets, what people don't understand is that there was a proposal put forward, clearly it came through in the council meeting, that this should have gone through a reclamation process, not a purchase at the top of the market for a huge percentage of land that you don't actually require and is not a priority to council.
Yep. I probably won't get into too much of that, but the option that was provided was for compulsory acquisition. Those that know about compulsory acquisition, it's not the easiest process to go through as provided. There's a number of hurdles that you do have to go through, and it's not necessarily the most favourable for councils in best interest. But the purchase price was undertaken with due diligence, with a number of relevant external parties involved in the process to provide and guide council around pricing and whatnot. So.
Going on to, thank you for that. Going on to another subject, or back to Enterprise Drive, the article also suggested that there was cost overruns. Whether those are accurate or not, people on the street in Beaudesert suggested to me that it's a figure far larger than that. Can you tell us what those cost overruns are? We've also heard that it's been in relation to the not through material costs, but through the drainage had to be redone at Enterprise Drive. So can you just run through the capital works program there, where those, just to recap for everyone here, and what those actual cost overruns have amounted to, and where Enterprise Drive is at now in terms of those blocks are now for sale and the anticipation of recouping those funds?
Yep.
I'm part of an appropriate process of asset disposal, which council has already resolved to follow.
Chris, would it be worth mentioning it's grant funded and to the value?
Yes, we must acknowledge the $5 million that was actually grant funded to fund that project. And it wasn't just the redevelopment, it was also the rebuilding of the main intersection on Brisbane Street / Mount Lizzie Highway.
Two last questions, sorry. I'll get them out of the way very quickly. One is, I've just had a mental blank, I've forgotten the one. It'll come back to me, I hope. The town centre revitalisation program, there doesn't seem to be any mention of that in this budget. Is there any cost overruns there, and where is that program at?
Two parts to that. The first part is that council's recently resolved to complete the 5 stages of that project, utilising other capital project funds. So that will actually occur starting in the next month on some of the more landscape type aspects around sort of adjacent to Brisbane Street. And we'll continue right through with the planned end date around Christmas, bearing weather conditions and others. Realistically, the bulk of or a fair portion of the cost increase is material supply. Again, there is quite large culvert order that's required to be installed to actually cope with the water that needs to be taken out of Brisbane Street to cater for the flooding that occurs there on unfortunately a fairly regular basis.
I've now recalled the last question. So again, talking about these, how you prioritise these capital works programs, and I guess some of the operating works as well. If just for an example, you've got $500,000 for footpaths at Wongawallan Road on Tamborine Mountain. Now, can you tell us how that is identified by council as a priority? Is that the top priority for the people of Tamborine Mountain, that council's come to make that decision that there needs to be $500,000 worth of footpath in? And can you also talk generally about the efficiencies that you've been able to identify that has stripped X number of dollars, what that might be, of million out of this budget before concluding at this figure? Thank you.
So I'll deal with question one. We do have a fairly rudimentary prioritisation process with all of the projects that we put on the program. When I use the words rudimentary, because I've been involved in prioritisation models that need about 20 odd criteria by which you actually prioritise the projects. And I've been involved in prioritisation models that have 4 criteria, and they all tend to bring the same projects closer to the top of the list. So the reality of it is we have a 37-year roughly backlog of identified footpath new works. At the same time, we have existing footpaths that we need to invest in and keep maintained to appropriate level. At the moment, it's probably around a 60% new to 40% rehabilitation, which is the rebuilding of existing footpaths. So we actually prioritise on Wongawallan has been on the program for quite a number of years, and fortunately, we've received a number of grants as well to accelerate our footpath program. Probably not to the extent that we would have liked, given some of the cost impacts and issues we've had with delivery with concrete and other factors in that. So, look, there is a process. If you went onto our website, there's a thing called the footpath strategy. In that, in the back of that, it actually shows the prioritisation that is used, or the criteria by which those projects are prioritised.
Thanks, Tom. Council's always looking for efficiencies within the workplace, improving processes going through. More so recently, it's been around funding applications, but as I've referred to, many of those funding applications are winding up or not likely to be advertised very soon. We're always trying to reduce the paperwork in the office. I'm probably not the best example, but those other people around me are very good at using IT and getting those systems set up. We've recently done that with the planning, positive feedback on. We're also trying to reduce the amount of timesheets in the workplace by making them go electronically as well. So we're doing all of those at this point in time and trying to drive efficiencies through people making suggestions through a postcard to the CEO process. So we're consistently going down those paths. We've had a relatively recent review of the yellow plant, and we're currently doing a review of the white plant at this point in time as well.
I think, Chris, what's important also, just on Tom's query is, whilst we're providing a 10-year capital works program here, there's probably another 30 years worth of works that's required to be done. This year's program includes $32 million for capital works, not including carry forwards. You could probably triple that in terms of when we take into account what's the legacy items when it comes to the asset management, the areas that are requiring those that investment and intervention. But as Chris said, we're trying to maximise what we've got with what we can rationally and the community can sort of afford. So there's a list of projects beyond these 10 years that still have to be considered as well.
It's probably also worth noting, Oliver, that efficiency gains are certainly reflected in our zero-based budgeting process. So we are not a council that takes the budget from the previous year and builds on it. Our zero-based budgeting means that we see efficiencies every time we build a new budget, and those efficiencies are then reinvested in other areas and other service deliverables. So probably it's worth noting that what you are seeing is council delivering more for the same amount of money in many cases.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Hi, Susie Cunningham here, Beaudesert resident ratepayer and business partner and journalist at the Beaudesert Bulletin. I just have a question about the Beaudesert Town Centre revitalisation pig and calf sale yard site. Could you please tell me some detail about what the $100,000 is for?
The $100,000 is an approximate value put in the budget for some work to be carried out there. A report is yet to be provided to council by officers with options. Certainly, we understand that there will be a level of consultation required. The funding that is there is a reasonable assessment by officers of what could achieve something on the site. So I'm not in a position to make any more comment other than that.
Thank you.
Very good pick up by Ms Cunningham on pig and calf yards. So I'd like to follow up on that and ask council why it is that since November last year, the region has been trying to find out the cost of the legal costs in rolling back the court case for the heritage listing and why that still has not been announced to the public. Surely someone can walk around and find an invoice and advise us.
There is certainly a report being prepared by officers. Look, at the end of the day, they have competing priorities on what work is required, and also we'd like to put a report that's got all the details contained within it, including potential future options for the site. So that certainly has added some time to actually presentation of the final cost, as well as other aspects to the court case that need to be covered off, to have a full report for council to digest and look through.
Just in addition to that, it should also be noted that court case went ahead and council actually moved a motion that they would come back to the people once they had an estimated cost of that court case and approve it by a motion that they would pursue that through the courts. That motion, that was never presented back to council.
I think there's a notice of motion to detail the costs. I can't recall the other aspects, but we can certainly look into it. But I know there is a notice of motion around providing a report back to council around the legal costs and everything else. But I can't recall the other aspect about recouping.
Not recouping, whether or not council would go forward with the court case, and that never came back to council.
Yeah, certainly have to take that on notice.
Just to return to a note of positivity, perhaps, rather than negativity. I have a comment to make, but also I want to congratulate the council and the staff of the council, CEO, etc., for actually putting this on. There are people around Queensland who have no access to this sort of forum, and I think it's a really positive thing that this council has tried to do. My comment is in relation to the budget. I have no problems with the detail. Councils will be councils and budgets will be budgets, and some people will be favoured and some won't. However, I do have a concept in mind, and that's the signs that we're looking at, Scenic Rim Regional Council. And I'm just wondering how much money you are putting aside to promote this particular region. I'm not a local, I've only lived here 45 years. But one of the things that I have seen in that time, particularly in since this council was amalgamated, one of the things that I have seen is the growth of tourism in this area, and you've only got to drive around the district to see what the effect of that tourism in the area has been. It's a positive. Now, I know that's not necessarily council business, but I would hope as a council you would be allocating funding, particularly in relation to grants, and given the fact that in less than 10 years' time you'll have more tourists in this area that you can poke a stick at, it's probably time for the council to factor some of those things in. So it's just a comment, and I am very positive about the future of Scenic Rim Regional Council. I think it's a really good concept, and I think just in the short time it's been going, the tourism in this area is fantastic.
Thank you. I have a general manager that's excited as a wagon load of monkeys to turn around and talk about every aspect of tourism, so I'll hand over to Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you, CEO. I didn't know I was that excited, but it's nice for you to point it out. Off the top of my head, without having my budget in front of me, I think the regional marketing budget is about $245,000. They use that money as a really productive team to seek advertorial and other promotions for the region in partnership with Tourism and Events Queensland and our regional tourism organisation known as Beaudesert, the Brisbane Economic Development Association. We look to partner with Destination Gold Coast, and if you look in our operational plan reporting, you'll see quarter upon quarter just how much is generated through social media campaigns and those partnerships through unpaid marketing outcomes, and the advertorial that we achieve through wins like The Lonely Planet, and the marketing campaigns that we've been able to facilitate through bushfire recovery grants has far outstripped by the many, many millions of dollars in publicity for the region than the $245,000 that the council has as a cash injection. We also have in our budget funding to support Destination Scenic Rim, the one unified local tourism organisation who work with us, with Tourism and Events Queensland and with the whole industry on focusing our efforts to market the region and attract visitors. And that includes the Invest Scenic Rim website, which we spent $250,000 of grant funding to completely evolve that, which has given us so much more exposure as a region. And the other point I would raise is that we have a couple of strategies now that are guiding us in managing tourism in a sustainable way, because the one thing we don't want is undermine the very thing that attracts the visitors that you've identified that are coming to the region. So we're trying to do an end-to-end process, and events as a strategy are part of that. And of course we've launched last week Eat Local Month, which attracts some 40,000+ people to the region, and now it will be over a month instead of 10 days. So there's not one size fits all when it comes to tourism, but certainly to be named in the top 10 regions in the world, number 8 out of 10, I think is testament to the incredible tourism industry operators that we have here that represent this region in such a professional and exciting way.
Any other queries out there? If there's, I might just make a quick update around what the process is now going forward, and then certainly invite the Mayor to provide some closing thoughts. But acknowledge the team members involved with the community engagement team, Natika and Jenna. If you do have particular queries, we are suggesting that the feedback form on the table there that you can scan with your phone takes you to the Let's Talk Scenic Rim engagement page on the budget. Also, the team has a number of iPads at the back that you can directly input your feedback to. Now, the feedback is open until Wednesday next week, the 3rd of May. We will then invite submissions or submitters to come forward and present these personally at the council meeting on the 9th of May. If you're not able to, we will still table those accordingly. From there, the submissions and the feedback will be tabled to council for further consideration, and then determining any impact or any changes to the revisions of the budgets going forward. The Mayor indicated before that we are looking to adopt the budget at a special meeting of council on the 14th of June. So there's still a number of workshops between council and the executive that need to be undertaken before the final position of council is is determined. I might call on to the Mayor to provide some comments.
Well, firstly, thank you, CEO and the team for working through those. They've actually had some practice with some of those questions. My opening observation is the conversation that we've gone through tonight is very reflective of the breadth and depth of the conversations that we have as the elected councillors, looking at all of those challenges. And really what tonight's conversation has again reflected is the stresses and strains that we're trying to grapple with in balancing to put a budget together. It could be easy, so from tonight's conversation, it could be easy indeed to continue to keep rates low, and there are councils who do that, but it comes at a cost. And what I've heard in the conversation tonight is a really strong focus for council to recognise some breadth of needs and the importance of dealing with some long-term needs around facilities upgrades and particularly around sports so that we have that proper engagement for a modern community, and that we ensure that we include all parts of our community, and recognising we have some communities that have nothing in this space, as well as others that have had materials fall into decline to the point where they can no longer be used. We have to step up to those challenges. We're doing that at a time where we're facing the difficulty of being a distributed region that doesn't always get high utilisation of every facility we nonetheless have to maintain to have a level of service available right across the region. And you heard the example about swimming pools. That's a burden of cost that we believe is important as a service model, as an example. You've heard again tonight, we do work very hard on the zero-base approach to our budgeting and searching for those efficiencies, but efficiencies get consumed with increasing legislative expectation and with the never-ending list of unmet needs that we try to fit on the table. This year's had a particular set of overlays that you've heard about and you've recognised, and certainly I saw some nodding heads, have experienced the challenges of a volatile cost market. Material costs, the difficulty to access, the additional challenges to existing programs that we've had that have challenged us in the current year around recovering from adverse weather impacts. I do like that we continue to get this challenge around footpaths come up, and the reality is we do still have a 37-year backlog. In 2016 that was a 75-year backlog, and we doubled the funding towards footpaths, and the costs continue to go up, and we're still back at 37 years, and it's then about how much more do we continue to increase and juggle and balance. It is the challenge that we face. Probably one of the items that wasn't quite teased out tonight by the team that's worth reflecting, as the cost base to deliver has significantly moved, that does mean that we have to recut the long-term capital planning particularly. We've done that, which means in effect some things that used to look like they were the 10-year capital plan are now a 15-year forward plan, and some have shifted back in timing to try and balance that demand on funds and stay within a reasonable bandwidth. I'm delighted with the recognition of what I do believe we struck gold with the marketing campaign coming out of the bushfires as the richest place on earth, and we were able to get the grant funding to stretch our dollar further and further, which gave us brand recognition like never before. That comes with challenges. But I am grateful for that recognition at the end. It highlights, most importantly, this is a special place on earth. This is a region that in every community is worth attention, worth investment. The challenge is we can't do it all in every year, and we need to find a plan that is sensible, and moves forward. That's why we do these strategic plans around facilities. We do them around public spaces. We did it around playgrounds. We do it around footpaths. We continue to do a sharp focus on our cost management. Thank you for those recognitions tonight. I do urge everyone, either here or online, we do want to understand those perspectives. We do want those inputs into this process. We believe this is an important step forward in the maturity of the understanding and engagement for the preparation of our budgets. But above all, what we are committed to as a council, from the conversations I hear in the chamber, is making sure that the region that we hand on to a next generation is one that we are all proud of. And I think that is something we all share as a common goal. Thank you again for your time tonight. I wish you good evening. Please travel safely. Good night.